Welcome to Citrin Cooperman's Corner Chats. I'm Peter Katz from Westfair Communications, publisher of the Westchester County Business Journal, Fairfield County Business Journal, and WAG Magazine, along with digital newsletters to keep you fully informed. On this edition, we'll be chatting about a wide variety of issues in the fields of architecture and engineering that also just happen to be relevant to myriad other types of businesses. And with me is Gil Watkins, a certified public accountant and tax partner in Citrin Cooperman's Connecticut office and the leader of the firm's architecture and engineering practice. Now, Gil has more than 30 years' experience in providing a full spectrum of services to not only architecture and engineering firms, but a wide range of other businesses as well. And welcome, Gil.
Hey, Peter, I'm happy to join with you today.
And now, Gil, just to plunge right in, would it be an exaggeration to suggest that we can get an idea about the overall health of the economy and the level of business activity, especially during this COVID period, just by looking to see how many busy architects and engineers there are in the normal course of business?
It's an interesting question. Generally, architects and engineers are the bellwether of the forthcoming economy. Usually, when the economy is starting to tank a little bit, you'll find that architects and engineers have a lot less to do because nobody's planning for the future. Businesses are holding back. The backlog is the key to architects. Their projects are so long, they want to have presumably 6 months to a year or beyond in terms of backlog. And what happened when the pandemic first hit is that everybody went into a crisis mode, concerned about the backlog, and depending upon the industry, which I'll talk about just a moment, it depends how long that backlog lasted. We've got some clients who specialize in the hospitality industry, restaurant planning, hotels, anything to do with leisure. And unfortunately, these poor guys got hit pretty hard in terms of their work. So they had a backlog. They're going fine. For the most part, they're okay for most of 2020. They're concerned about 2021. On the other hand, you've got the architects who are designing high-end homes or other types of housing, and they have had a tremendous year.
Is it possible that you were able to get a sense of just how badly COVID has impacted the construction industry, the public works projects, things that require the expertise of architects and engineers?
Yes, up to a point. And I think what happened there is in the very beginning, a lot of construction projects, New York State in particular, they were curtailed for a long period of time. So the designers could still do their design works. And this would more relate probably to engineers in terms of infrastructure and that type of work. But that started to slow down as the construction industry also slowed down to some extent.
And can you give us a sense of just how Citrin Cooperman operates in this particular field, these specialty fields, such as architecture and engineering? Is it different from any other business, or are there special areas that you have to pay particular attention to when you go into a client?
I think architects and engineers, like any other service business or any business actually, have got various nuances involved in it. Everybody has a basic accounting that needs to be done. Architects and engineers are different in that they've got large projects, tracking the projects by phases so that they can stay on budget. You have $150,000, $200,000 budget, and it's going to take you over 5 or 6 months. You need to make sure that you're not putting all your costs in up front.
Can you give us a sense of what the procedure is when you first go into a client? What is it that you first do? Do you have to come up to speed on the nature of their business? Do you just open up the books and start you pull out the calculator and start running numbers? Just what are the steps that you need to take as an accountant coming in to look at a business for the first time in the specialty field?
Yeah, so let's assume that it's a business that's already been in existence. So I think the first thing we do is we meet with them. We talk to the owners, talk to the firm itself, get an understanding before even seeing the numbers. Get an understanding of what they do. Look at the website, see what their specialty is. Are they working in housing single buildings? Are they working in skyscrapers? To get a sense of what that is, so you have a sense of what you might be looking for when you do look at the numbers. Then you're looking at back tax returns to get a sense of any history, and then further going into current book stars, filing a trial balance sheet, P&L, and at that point, looking at the details, seeing if they're recording their work in process and their accounts receivable in the right period, offsetting it with the proper expenses in the right period. Because again, you're dealing with a project that might last 6 months to beyond a year. There has to be a matching of the revenue process and the related expenses to that.
Do you get project specific where an architect or an engineer will be looking for specific financial guidance in handling one project versus what they might do in another project?
We don't normally get quite as granular by project unless we're being asked to do so. Usually we're taking the period or taking the operation as a whole. Everybody's going to have, if you have a number of jobs, some jobs are going to be winners, some jobs are not going to be quite as profitable. So what we'll do is, for a period of time, and generally a year is the best way to measure it, is we'll look at key financial indicators to see how the business is running, and we'll see how it is for that firm itself, and then in conjunction with how it compares to industry standards. For example, if a company has a billing multiple, which is the revenue divided by the direct labor of 3.5, we know that that's equal to industry standard. If somebody's got 4, then they're doing better. Their 2.5 is less. So we look at the indicators relevant to the firm compared to the industry and other firms of like size and like same type of product.
And when you say that you look at these firms and compare with other industries, just how do they compare with other industries? I mean, we know that architecture, designing buildings, picking materials, doing things that will be aesthetically appealing, can be a very creative thing. Does the necessity to use creativity in your work detract from the ability of people in these professions to do what every business person must do in the way of tracking finances, tracking expenses, being sure that there's adequate cash flow, the basics of finance?
Yeah, I think they, as you pointed out, everybody's looking for the same results, looking to make sure that the business is going to be there going forward. In this case, they are looking at it by project. I think it's important that they do roll forward of cash flows and forecasts, and probably a rolling 12-month roll forward is the best. Not all firms can have that in-house to help them get to that point, although we can help with that if need be. So it's important to track those items because they can, especially as you mentioned, in the design field, at some point you've got to stop designing and put the pencil down and start working towards the construction phase, next phase, getting the blueprints set and such.
So there are business fundamentals that need to be addressed also. How has COVID really affected businesses? I mean, are they changing the way they do business as a result of lessons learned, problems that have been brought to the forefront because of the pandemic? Are they having trouble doing things as simple as working from home, trying to run an architecture business where you're dealing with clients who you used to see in person? Now you have to do that remotely. Have you noticed an effect on business operations because of the pandemic?
Yes, very, very much so. And different firms are ready for it in different ways. The other thing about the pandemic is that everybody seemed to be sort of aware of what was occurring mid-February. Beginning of March became more of a reality. And then, like for our firm, on March 17th, everybody left the firm and went and worked from home. In Citrin Cooperman's case, we were very well poised to do all the things you mentioned. But a lot of firms just weren't used to it, so they had to do a lot of scrambling to get ready to work in the COVID environment. Now, be that as it may, we've got now 9 months behind us in terms of getting to this point. There have been a lot of investments in terms of capital expenditure, so people can work remotely, maybe using the cloud more often. There's talk about maybe limiting office space, especially if everybody has new leases that are coming up. Architects love to collaborate on projects, especially the design architects. They have these nice models, a whole team of designers who kind of sit around, talk about it, throw out ideas. So they're doing that now primarily through Zoom, or Teams or some other way. So they're making it work. Architects would normally travel to the clients on a more regular basis and to sites. That is being done more via remote access. You can do more in a day as opposed to having to travel for one day, meet with a client for a day, and then travel for another day to go somewhere else. And then just one more item that's interesting too, for the firms that are doing well and they're hiring new people, they're not necessarily stuck on hiring their geography. I've got clients in New Haven that might be hiring somebody in Colorado because you got the right person, the right designer.
Can you give us a sense of the scope of your practice? You mentioned a client in New Haven. Is this truly a national practice that you have, or is the bulk of it in the New York metro area?
The ones that we deal with mostly here in the Connecticut and White Plains office are those in the tri-state area. A good concentration in New York, just after we have a concentration in New Haven. Now, they are located in these various cities, but a lot of these architects are doing work internationally or anywhere in the world or the country in terms of their design work. And certainly being able to do that adds to their ability to weather almost any type of recession, and certainly helps with the pandemic, because maybe that's China was closed in the beginning, so there's no work there, but China opened up sooner, so there's construction and work going on there before it came back in the United States. So that's helpful.
Without violating any confidences or doing anything that's unethical in the way of disclosing dealings with clients, did you have some clients who were able to take advantage of some of the federal aid that was offered during the pandemic, and how did they manage in terms of holding on to staff? Were there layoffs? Was there a general shrinkage that was unavoidable for certain of these companies?
Yeah, I think virtually all of our clients, and most of all of my clients, took advantage of the PPP loans, and some have had to use those loans because of all the downturn that you mentioned. A number of them, businesses have been good enough that they've been able to hold on to most of that money and use it again. They're looking at it for the first part of 2021, when there's going to be some concern in their mind that backlog might not continue. And last time we had a pandemic was 100 years ago, so nobody has any real history what will happen if this thing does last longer. So, taking to the next part of your question, there were a number of the firms had some furloughs and cut back. Virtually everybody cut back on payroll in the very beginning, what I would call the crisis stage, where nobody really knew what was going on, just to preserve cash going forward. For the most part, I would say that most firms have, again, the ones that I work with on a more regular basis, have been able to go forward without furloughing too much. I think when it first occurred, there was some furloughing and some people maybe being let go. Again, maybe these sort of fringe people that were going to be let go anyway, just made it happen a lot quicker. But I've had a few clients who've actually have added staff this 9-month period.
With the prospect of vaccines becoming more reality now, perhaps as close as weeks or months away before vaccinations can start, is there any sense that the industries, architecture, engineering, construction in general, are poised for a major growth spurt now? And what would that mean for your practice as an accountant for these firms?
I think it probably depend upon the various sectors. If things really get to be rosy again, there's always going to be this in the back of your mind. And I think the one thing architects do, engineers support it, is they're looking to design for the new normal. That even though that vaccine might come around, we're going to be getting back to more normal, but there's going to be differences in terms of how offices were designed. Offices were getting to the point where they were becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, and even people hoteling office desks. I think there's going to be more in terms of maybe providing a little more room, doing something so that if this comes back in the next few years, there's not going to be a major replay. Those in hospitality, I think if there would be a rebound there, that all of a sudden people started going to hotels again, there'll be things. And some of my clients have had some of these projects, especially in hospitality, that were put on, not necessarily canceled, but put on hold. Those will come back probably, and that will be helpful. So whether it'll be enough to qualify as a boom will be one thing, but certainly I would think it'd be positive across the board.
How is it that you wound up specializing in the fields of architecture and engineering, and why is it that Citrin Cooperman decided to set up a whole specialty practice just for those fields?
Well, that's a two-part question. When I first started working for the accounting firm that was a predecessor before we joined Citrin Cooperman, my first probably 3 or 4 clients were architectural firms, mostly, again, in New Haven and in New York City. So what will happen is you have that base. It's easier to find new clients in that area. Because I think it's helpful for architectural firms and other firms to have an accounting firm that has a specialty in their area. It allows, as I'm talking to my clients about various items, and I see that they're experiencing a problem or experiencing something that's going to help them without having to disclose names or something. Take that same thought and use it into with other architectural firms. One example is architects are able to take a research and development credit, which one would not necessarily think would apply in this case. But once we became aware that it's there and that there's this benefit, plus some other sort of nuances that apply to the industry, we're able to then take that information and share it with others so that as a group, everybody can benefit. And that's what leads us into the industry segment. I think Citrin Cooperman has probably 40 or so different industry segments with the same concept there, that if somebody is deeply involved in an industry, it's only good news for our clients because we can learn from each other, we can share ideas and help the industry as a whole, and specifically the clients that we work with on a day-to-day basis.
Do you have a sense as to the necessity for businesses that deal in specialties such as architecture, engineering, or even a restaurant? That's a specialty. Running a hotel certainly is a specialty. Is there a sense as to what a firm such as Citrin Cooperman can do once you sit down and look at a particular business's books, talk to the owner, find out their views, their goals, their objectives? How can you, as an accountant, as an accounting firm, help people in particular vertical industries?
I think that's where the benefit of a firm like Citrin Cooperman comes into play, is that all accounting firms can prepare advisory, tax services, all the things we normally expect accounting firms to do. But what we've got teams of people who can help in various areas. If staying on the tax side, if I have a client who's looking to do some international work or dealing with different states, so there's going to be state and local tax issues, I've got a team I can pull in to help them how to structure and how to work things out. If somebody's looking to plan for the future in terms of succession planning, I've got teams who can come in, they can assess where they are. Ideally, we want to talk to somebody 3 or 4 years before they're going to do that transition so that we can make sure the books are in good shape and can provide a better multiple for individuals. So we've got so many areas of consulting where we can test profits, we can test systems. We've got a great group in terms of dealing with cybersecurity. So it's the ability to bring in the right team at the right time. So I can take everything to a certain point. I'm one of these jack of all trades. I know a lot about everything, but nothing specific about anything. So I can call on my teams to really help me in those specific areas so that we can provide full service to those individuals and companies.
I think you're just being modest, actually. How, in your 30 years of practice in these fields, how has the field changed? And I'm thinking, beyond the obvious, such as upgrading computers or getting computers in the first place to replace drafting tables and slide rules and things of that nature. Have you seen fundamental changes in the industry, how these fields operate?
Yeah, I think the technology certainly is a big part of it. When I first started going to visit firms, you have an office full of drafting tables and big rolls of paper and the blueprint machines running in the corner. So that certainly has changed in terms of just big screens and big computers in front of you. The other big change is in what can be designed these days. Go to New York and look at the skyscraper, the skyline, how it's changed. Hudson Yards, the buildings that can be designed with the new technology, new materials, and the engineering to back it up is just amazing. I see some of those skyscrapers in New York City, and they're so tall and so narrow that I don't know how they make them work. But again, that's over time. Instead of having a square building, it's amazing the beauty that they can create in their designs.
And as an accountant, have you had to change your approaches, learn new things to keep up with the businesses that you're providing services to?
Well, there's always the basics in terms of items. These days, the key is that information is so important to everybody. Information is changing all the time. So to have information that's a year old is getting to be too old. You have to be current in what's going on in the industry, what's going on in performance indicators, what are the trends. So I think that's probably the biggest piece. And in terms of quick information, and the other is the readiness to get back to people. Communication is 24/7 at this point, and people expect to have answers, maybe not right away, but certainly within a day, you need to be getting answers to people. And that's, I think, part of our client service and part of the adaptation that we try to work for and strive to.
And if I were an architect or if I were an engineer and I just got a great big contract to replace a sewer system in a major city, what would you tell me as an architect? How would you convince me that I need your services?
Well, I would talk about our experience, and I think the having the industry to pull upon in terms of looking at various items, in terms of key indicators, how to support individuals, maybe what software they have, if they've been kind of running along at a certain level, and this is like a huge increase, they're going to run into some initial growth problems. It's like the commercial where somebody has a website and they start getting their sales, and 1, 2, 3, 4, they're fine, they're happy. Then all of a sudden get 1,000 things on their website, and they get a little panicky. It's a big change to go from to getting a big contract that can really run your office. You run that contract well, and you're going to have a great year. If you, again, spend too much money up front in terms of the design or other pieces of it, it could actually hurt the business. So I think we can sit down with them, talk to them about them, talk about some software issues that they might, or some software options they might want to look into for that project and to run the firm. If this is going to be the step to take them to that next level from 30 people to 60 people or so. It changes the dynamics of the office. They have to start looking at maybe more space, although in the world, maybe not. So it's a matter of putting in perspective. These are the things that you've got to consider to make this next step a successful big step. And based upon what we've seen, we can help in those areas.
And Gil, is there any sense that you have as to what the legacy of this COVID-19 pandemic is going to be on the businesses that you deal with, that you provide services to, both in the specialties of architecture and engineering and outside of those specialties? Is there a legacy that businesses will have as a result of this experience that we all have gone through?
Well, I think they're all sort of reimagining their future in terms of what it'll be like and when that will actually will occur. I think there's going to be more flexibility with employers. That's going to build more trust between the business and employees and such. There's going to be more remote that's going on. I think just in general. That's sort of the example that this New Haven firm hired somebody from Denver. That person is going to stay in Denver and work in Denver. So there's going to be some remoteness that's going to continue in that regard. People have got to the point where remoteness, they've learned how to adapt to it. It's not going to replace. Again, the architects like to stand around a model, point things, talk to each other in real time. But it's going to be more flexibility in terms of dealing with that. And it'll probably help quite a bit in terms of the employee force. People with children at home. So I think it'll be more understanding as we go forward in terms of working together and maybe not being quite as rigid as businesses have been in the past.
All right, Gil Watkins of Citrin Cooperman, thanks so much for being